Hello, CST 110 team. Thank you for your patience and your cooperation as we make arrangements to reopen our campus. As you may have read in the email or the announcement posted on Blackboard, our campus had a water main break take place yesterday, and there is severe flooding throughout the WS building. As a result, we are waiting to hear back to when the campus will reopen. So for now, we'll just continue moving forward with our class, and we'll go ahead and listen to this lecture for Chapter 2. So these are some of the key items we would have covered in today's class, and that will carry on into our discussion for our next class meeting. So first, I want you to go ahead and picture the following situation. Imagine years from now, you are working in a hospital, and you approach a patient who looks at you up and down and immediately states the following: "You look like someone who's going to blow this place up. You're not a doctor." Now, if you were this doctor, or let's say another patient that was observing this situation, and you were present during this interaction, what would you do? What would you say? How would you ultimately react? Our focus for today's recorded lecture will include first impressions, errors in perception, and strategies to improve our overall perception of others. So as you listen to the main points in our discussion, I want you to keep the following questions that we mentioned earlier in mind. If you were the recipient, or you happen to hear such racist remarks, what would you do? What would you say? How would you ultimately react? To help us get started, let's look at the overview of the key points that we will be touching upon. We will first kick off this recorded lecture with something that starts with a Q and ends with this Z. So based on your perception, what do you assume? If you said quiz, then you are correct. We'll take a mini perception quiz to examine how you observe the outside world. This will lead to our discussion on automatic versus conscious processing. So we will distinguish between these two terms so you have a full understanding of what happens in each type of processing. Then we will discuss first impressions and especially cover factors that lead to first impressions, so you'll understand how we create these first impressions. We will then discuss errors in perception, particularly what happens when we create errors during our first impression, and we will categorize the types of prejudice that exist as well as the direct results of prejudice. Finally, we will discuss how you can improve your perception of others. So you'll notice that some of these sections will carry on from journal number 1. So we'll make sure that you correctly answered the questions addressed in journal number 1 and are able to identify other ways to improve your perception that you may not have discussed in your response. Finally, we will end this lecture with the social construction of self, which revolves around the idea of impression management. In other words, how do you want others to perceive you? Now let's go ahead and get started with the perception quiz. So go ahead and take a sheet of paper out with a pen or pencil, or open up a Word document as you answer the following 3 questions. So go ahead and number 1, 2, and 3. All right, here we go. Question 1. In which hand is the Statue of Liberty's torch? Is it in the right hand or is it in the left hand? You have a 50-50 chance of getting this correct. All right, ready for question 2? Here it is. On the American flag, is the uppermost stripe red or is it white? Again, 50-50 chance. Red or white? And remember, we don't want you to Google the response. This should be coming directly from your own memory. How have you perceived these stimuli in the past? Finally, are the letters on the UPS truck capitalized or are they lowercased? Again, another 50-50 chance of getting it correct. All right, so how did you do? Well, let's go ahead and examine the answers. Okay, in which hand is the Statue of Liberty's torch? Are you team left or are you team right? Well, if you are team right, then you are correct. The Statue of Liberty's torch is indeed in the right hand. On this picture, it looks like it's on the left side, but she is indeed holding it on the right hand. There we go. If you got it correct, give yourself a star or a happy face. Good work. Question 2. That stripe on the American flag, is the uppermost stripe red or is it white? I will give you a clue. The color at the top on the uppermost stripe is the same one as the bottom stripe, and the color is red. Team red. If you answered that correctly, again, give yourself a happy face or a star. Great work. And finally, the UPS truck. Have you been paying close attention to that logo? Well, let's see. Are those letters capitalized or lowercase? Let's take a look at the logo. The logo is lowercase U, P, and S. So how does this all relate to automatic processing versus conscious processing? Well, let's examine. Automatic processing, this is the subconscious approach. The key word is you're using your subconscious to make sense of what you are encountering, what stimuli you are processing. So if you see a flag with red and white stripes, and there are 50 white stars in a blue square on the left top hand corner, then what do you recognize? You're automatically going to assume this is the American flag. You don't have to go ahead and process every little piece of information. You already know this is what represents the American flag. The same thing happens when you are driving. So for those of you who have mastered the skill of driving, you don't have to double think of when you're going to stop your car or when you're going to go. You don't have to double think about red means stop, green means go. What does a stop sign look like? You know what to do when you approach these signals because it comes second nature to you. So think of automatic processing as a second natured approach. You don't have to double think about it. On the other hand, conscious processing, the key words here are you're using a slow, deliberative process. So you're using the process to examine and reflect on the stimuli, the signs, anything that's in front of you. So for instance, let's say that last week I had told you, I want you to go out and observe a UPS truck or look at the sign at the UPS store and tell me whether or not those letters are capitalized or lowercase. So for those of you who made the extra deliberative effort to find the answer, you would be using conscious processing to remember this information for today's class. Let's go back to the example on driving. When you are learning how to drive, you might require more conscious processing to be able to successfully pass your driver's ed exam. For instance, you may be more mindful and remind yourself, I need to stop a couple of feet before the line to make sure that I am able to pass the exam and, of course, not harm anyone as well. So remember, with automatic processing, again, this is you're using your subconscious. With conscious processing, it's a slow, deliberative approach. You're trying to take time to examine and reflect on the stimuli in front of you. So let's examine, how does this relate to the concept of first impression? Well, remember the following quote. You will never have a second chance to make a first impression. Because remember, how long does it take to create a first impression? Well, the textbook refers to just a few milliseconds, but most CST textbooks will go ahead and state that it takes about 3 seconds. So for any quiz or exam for this class, the correct answer will be 3. 1, 2, 3 seconds, boom, you've created an impression. Or you have gathered a first impression on someone. So let's examine, how does automatic processing relate to first impressions? Well, remember, if you're using your subconscious, you may jump to conclusions on an individual. Let's examine the following example. Say that you meet someone named Alejandro or Alejandra, and this individual, in the past, someone with this name of Alejandro or Alejandra, you knew someone with this name and they broke your heart. So when you are introduced to this new Alejandro or Alejandra, what do you immediately think? For some of us using automatic processing, we may think, bad person. I might get my heart broken with you, or I might not be able to trust you. Again, this is if you're jumping to conclusion, and the reason is because you're using automatic processing. You're using that subconscious thought of, Alejandro or Alejandra equals bad. Now, if you're using your conscious processing, remember this is a deliberative effort. You're taking an effort to examine. In this case, what may occur is you'll think, wait a minute, I may have had my heart broken by Alejandro or Alejandra, but that doesn't necessarily mean the same will happen with you. You are a unique individual, so let's go ahead and try being friends. That, again, requires more of a conscious effort on your part to go ahead and distinguish that these two individuals are unique and they may not necessarily be the same exact person. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this concept of first impressions and how we go ahead and form first impressions. Remember, automatic and conscious processing are just a piece of the puzzle. If we create errors in first impression, that may be based on automatic processing. Other factors to keep in mind are as follows. Let's say that you are walking down the street and you see Beyonce walking at you. Maybe you've never heard about Beyonce in your life and you see her walking with this facial expression. What do you automatically assume? Well, based on the physical appearance, you may think, she's having a bad day, or I don't want to talk to her. She looks really mean, putting it in kind words. So what does that remind us of? Well, one of the ways that we form first impressions is through the concept of physical appearance. Now, you may find that to be a little shallow, but let's face it. In those 3 seconds when you're meeting someone, you're just looking at their outer appearance, maybe their nonverbal cues, and if they quickly said their name, that's all you have. So when we are meeting people for the first time, we are immediately looking at their level of attraction. This can be both physical attraction or it can even be social attraction. For instance, if a person is smiling at you, then you'll be able to start guessing on whether or not you may like this person. Or is this person trustworthy? Based on that person's handshake, you may determine whether or not this person is aggressive or maybe competent. So same thing with Beyonce walking down the street with this face. You may see her, maybe you've never heard of Beyonce. You think, she looks aggressive. Let's turn the other way. So again, physical appearance is one way that we form our impressions. That's something to keep in mind. Second is implicit personality theory. With implicit personality theory, you are forming impressions based on an assumption that you make about someone's personality. So let's say that you are talking to someone, they tell you, hey, I speak 5 languages. Hi, I'm Jenny and I speak 5 languages. What do you automatically assume? Well, you might think, wow, this person is really smart. I can barely speak 1 language. So again, if you start learning unique facts about this individual, then you're going to form an impression based on the assumption of that person's personality. On the other hand, the person may not have told you that they speak 5 languages, but they only know about 2 or 3 words in the other languages. So again, you'll want to start asking more questions to figure out whether or not this person is fluent. Now, the next concept is going to be assume similarity. So we'll come back to that one because our first section of our lecture is about to wrap up. So stay tuned. We'll come back and talk about assume similarity in just a moment. To help you continue with the lecture, go ahead and click on part 2 for chapter 2. Thank you.